Hello, welcome to our Böll.Global. Herzlich willkommen zum Böll.Global Abortion as a Fundamental Right.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu
wir warten noch ein bisschen, bis noch mehr Teilnehmende kommen, aber schon mal jetzt für alle, die Übersetzung vom Englischen ins Deutsche brauchen, die Anleitung ist im Chat.
You can check how to use the interpretation service in the chat.
Discussion will be held in English, so for translation from English into German or the other way around, you can use the translation button. So I will slowly start. Maybe wait a few more seconds and then we can jump right into this amazing discussion that we have coming up today. So again, a very warm welcome to our 21st Böll.Global. Today we will look at abortion as a fundamental right, and together with our amazing panelists, we will discuss what German feminists can learn from the successes in other countries, but also what we can all learn from each other in terms of strategies and practices on how to make sure that at some point we will guarantee abortion as a fundamental right for everyone. My name is Daria Binishek. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the director of the Global Unit for Feminism and Gender Democracy of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. And we work in different feminist topics, and one of them is reproductive justice. And within this topic, we will discuss today the right for abortion. And I have the pleasure to discuss this with three great panelists that I will introduce very shortly. Maybe to start, I mean, I already said, if you need translation, you can use the translation button. Wenn Sie Übersetzung brauchen, können Sie den Übersetzungsbutton klicken. So the discussion will be in English.
If you want to listen to the translation, use the button at the bottom of the screen.
I will give a short introduction and then introduce my panelists. And then we will discuss some questions that I prepared. And then I really hope that all of you, I already see some familiar names from pro-choice and feminist movement. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions also to our panelists. So feel free to ask them in the Q&A section that you can find at the bottom bar. We will be together for 1.5 hours. So German time, 5:30, we're closing, and I'm very excited for our discussion. What are we talking about today? About half of the world's population has the capacity to become pregnant. And until now, there is no contraceptive method that is actually 100% effective. This means that potentially half of the population can be at risk of getting pregnant unintentionally. And the access to this essential health service, which is abortion, varies very widely across the globe. Often it is a matter of socioeconomic factors. If a person has access to a safe abortion, safe and free, and many times this is even worse if the laws prohibit or severely restrict the access to this basic healthcare service. According to the WHO, and these are numbers that are a few years old, but I'm sure they have not changed too much, around 47,000 people, and these are just official numbers, die each year due to unsafe abortions. And as we all know, restricting abortions only causes even more unsafe abortions. It doesn't make people not have abortions, because this is what will always happen, I guess, if one becomes pregnant unintentionally. Now, there are countries on every continent where laws and social prejudice makes it very difficult or even impossible for pregnant women to exercise their right to reproductive self-determination and to access safe abortions. Around the world, pro-choice activists have been campaigning for these rights, especially in regions with a very strong anti-rights movement or conservative movement, which we know is a growing tendency worldwide. And there are countries like in France where recently abortion was actually legalized and guaranteed within the constitution. Shout outs to the feminists and actually everyone in France for that. In Germany, we're still quite far away from this. But for example, in countries like Colombia that had a very restrictive legislation on abortion, now in 2022, thanks to an amazing campaign by Causa Justa, and one of our panelists is actually from this campaign, so she can share more later, has been successful in achieving legalization of abortion in Colombia. And in Poland, which has one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the EU, we have a new government now, so there are high hopes that maybe there will be a liberalization of a very restrictive law for abortion, which actually factually doesn't allow people to have safe and legal abortions in Poland at all. In Germany, looking at Germany, abortions are within the criminal code. Under certain circumstances, pregnant people can access abortions. They have to obey to a 3-day mandatory waiting period, go to a certain counseling beforehand, and then they have to usually pay for the abortion themselves because it is still criminalized. This leads to stigmatization of the person who wants to have an abortion, but also of the doctors who are offering abortion, which can also be one factor that leads to a crisis in provision of abortion in certain areas of the country. There were high hopes with the current government in Germany that this might change. There was a commission installed that released a report in April, and actually the report recommended a general legalization of abortions up to the 12th week of pregnancy. But so far, none of the coalition partners have put forward a corresponding law. So now we sit here and we ask, what can we learn from successful legalization campaigns in other places, and what are effective strategies to actually legalize abortion and make sure that this basic healthcare service is available to everyone. To discuss this question, I have 3 amazing panelists that I want to introduce now and ask them to turn their cameras on. Firstly, we have Katrin Lange, a political scientist, and Katrin Lange works for the Observatory for Socio-Political Developments in Europe. A very warm welcome to you. Katrin has been observing the developments around abortion rights in Germany and in Europe, and we are very happy that you are here, Katrin. Then we have Laura Gil. Laura is a doctor and is part of the group Médicos por el Derecho a Decidir, which translates to Doctors for the Right to Decide, maybe something similar we have in Germany called Doctors for Choice. Laura is from Colombia, and her group, Médicos por el Derecho a Decidir, is also part of this campaign, Causa Justa, that actually was successful in pushing for legalizing abortion in Colombia. So very warm welcome also to you. It's very early in Colombia, so thank you for making it to this event. And last but not least, Justyna Wyrtyńska. She's a women's rights activist, abortion activist from Poland, and you're part of Abortion Dream Team. And many of you might know Justyna because Justyna actually faced repression very personally, being charged because she helped a pregnant woman get an abortion. But I'm sure we will hear later about your story and about your activism. So thank you all for being here. I think we have an amazing panel. And let me get right into it. I would like to give you maybe time for short input. If you could share with me and with the audience why you think abortion is actually a fundamental right, and maybe also connected to the question how we can achieve it, because it is not yet a right that everyone has access to. I would like to give maybe first, starting from the back, the word to Justyna, and then we move on. Justyna, please, the floor is yours.
Oh wow, it's a quite first of all, thank you for inviting me here to have the possibility to speak. And your question is very, very tough to answer, but in the same time, it's very easy because we will do abortions no matter the laws will be, no matter the politics will think about we should do or not, what we shouldn't do, and nobody will stop it because this is what we sometimes need and sometimes want, and that's it. And nobody should force us to decide by ourselves, to decide that for us, this is our decisions, and if we don't want to be pregnant, we will never be pregnant because we just don't want to be pregnant, and we do everything, even if it's something dangerous for us, to stop this pregnancy. And this is why this is the fundamental right, because this is our right to decide, and that's it. But of course, politicians think in a different way. They believe, especially that we have the situation right now in Poland. You mentioned that we have the new government, which in Europe looks quite progressive, but in practice, it's not progressive at all. And they think that they have a right to decide because of they are politicians, they rule the country, so they think that they have this chance to decide how the law could look like. And there is like many discussions about decriminalization, many discussions about legalization in Poland, but to be honest, how those discussions looks like, it's about opinions, it's about ideology, not about the facts. And this is very, very sad because we really don't want to listen to somebody's opinions. We just want to have the right. And this is very simple. But many of those who are against the right to abortion think that in a different way.
Thank you so much, Justina, for these opening words. And I think you touched upon something that we can already, I will write it down as a learning or as something to consider, which is that it's actually not about opinions. It shouldn't be. It is about facts and rights. But obviously, also in Germany, I would say the debates run a lot around opinions. Laura, for you, why is abortion a fundamental right, especially from your point of view as a doctor?
All right. So I've never heard of or seen or practiced an abortion that has not been thought of a way of defending a fundamental right. And that's the reason why I said that, is because every woman, every person that decides to have an abortion, it's because they are defending their health, their well-being, and their life, and the way they want to live. And it's because they want to live their life in a special fashion, which only they can decide. And that means they are defending their right to dignity, because they are not just a body that produces humans. They are persons that want to live their lives in a special fashion. And that is what we know as dignity. Also, the kids, when you are denied an abortion, you are denied equality, because abortion is a health service that only women need. And when you restrict abortion, the ones that are affected are those that are more vulnerable. So this deepens social differences and economical differences, and it makes our society more unequal. So all of those reasons are fundamental rights, but most of all, becoming a mother, it's about our right to freedom of conscience. When you decide whether or not to be a mother, whether or not to continue pregnancy, you are deciding upon your conscience, what your conscience is telling you, which is what is good to do. So the least thing that a woman deserves when she wants to become a mother, which implies a lot of changes in her life and a whole different life, is to want to be a mother. that is the least that you can hope for. And also, I don't want to leave children out of this conversation, because the least thing that a little baby, that a person, that a new person deserves is to come to this world wanted and in an environment that is welcoming. And the only person that knows whether this can be, this can happen or not, is whoever is going to parent her or him. And that is the person that is pregnant. So that's why I think abortion is a fundamental right, not just based on fundamental rights, but it's a fundamental right.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think you touched upon a second very important point, which is the equality aspect. No, oftentimes we discuss abortion as being an ethical question, or at least this is what I know from the discussion in Germany. But it is actually first and foremost a democratic question of equality, and I think you laid that out quite well. Katrin, now you're the last in the first round. So what do you have to add to the idea of abortion as a fundamental right?
Yeah, I can only agree with the previous speakers. Being able to terminate a pregnancy is a prerequisite for bodily self-determination and fundamental to gender equality. So in international law, there is no explicit right to abortion. However, being able to access a legal and safe abortion is closely tied to human rights and enshrined in international law. Also, the World Health Organization formulates progressive recommendations on how the legal framework and healthcare services best guarantee human rights standards. So the fact is that a ban on abortions does not prevent abortions, like Justina said before, but rather leads to more high-risk abortion and violates human rights. So that is why the right to abortion is fundamental. And however, there is even more at stake when we look at movements opposing the right to abortion, but I think we will discuss this later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will actually stay with you. So you made the shortest input now, but you will now get the first question also. So I think all of you already laid out, I think, our common ground, which is what that abortion is and why it is a fundamental right. Now but some people seem to disagree, and I speak both about politicians, but also public opinion, or at least those that kind of lead public opinion might disagree on that. But even in countries with very restrictive laws, like we have seen in Colombia or also Argentina, there is a chance to actually legalize abortion and to get the political majorities for that. And I want to firstly jump with you into the context that we're actually talking about, because I mean, we have here very different voices on the panel, and in many countries, the laws differ widely. So we first should see where are we actually, and then which strategies worked and will they also work in another context. So this is why my first question is to you, Katrin. You work at the Observatory for Socio-Political Developments in Europe, and you have been closely observing and analyzing the recent developments over the right to abortion in Europe and Germany. And maybe you can just put us into the picture. Where do we stand actually with the right to abortion in Europe? And what are the challenges we currently face? You're still muted, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was too fast. So of course I can. At the observatory, we published 2 papers on the right to abortion in Europe last year. The first paper dealt with the political contestations around the right to abortion in Europe, which I will say something later on. The second paper was a comparison of the regulation and provision of abortion in 5 EU member states, so Germany, France, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Spain. So the national framework conditions were contrasted with the recommendations of the World Health Organization and also with the human rights standards of reproductive and sexual rights, and with the concept of reproductive justice. So all in all 5 EU member states should improve their regulation and provision abortions to guarantee the rights and health of pregnant persons effectively. However, there are differences between these member states. So Sweden and the Netherlands offer very good access to abortion, The regulations in Sweden are considered the most liberal in Europe and come closest to a right to abortion, as we understand. And in France and Spain, they have facilitated the access to abortion in recent years. And like you said, France became recently the first state in Europe that gives constitutional status to having an abortion. Regulation in Germany are always restrictive in comparison and not compatible with the international framework. Like you said before, in Germany, abortions are within the criminal code since over 150 years. So then the Commission released their report and recommended a general legalization of abortions in the first 12 weeks. In mid-April, nothing really happened, as you stated before. So to change the situation and to put pressure on the German federal government, the civil society should push for change, of course, and push together. So, however, there are initiatives already. An open letter, a German petition. I know that there are plannings on the occasion around the International Safe Abortion Day. There will be an action week in September, and there are funding requests as well. So a quite active stakeholder, in my view, is the German Bündnis für sexuelle Selbstbestimmung. There are possibilities to get connected with other activists by joining, for example, alliance meetings, also online, and the Bündnis also pushes for a strong nationwide movement and association of initiatives, groups and individuals. So therefore, they formulated also already common basic demands, but just a bit inside of the more progressive side of Europe. I think we have time later to get to more the restrictive side ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I mean, I can, if I may, also, I'm moderating, but also as being part of, counting myself as part of the pro-choice movement in Germany. I have been working before at the Gunda Werner Institute fighting for abortion rights. I am very, very disappointed. And I think a lot of feminists also from the this alliance that you mentioned, the Bündnis für sexuelle Selbstbestimmung, I think some of them are also here as in the audience. There is a big frustration also with the fact that nothing is really happening from the side of the government. So I think it also is time to, or it is very good that there are weeks planned to be active. And we just hope that also our discussions here can fuel some of those struggles and debates. Which leads me to Justyna, to you. Poland, as you said, even we're complaining about the situation in Germany, which is not perfect and where abortions are not legal, but in Poland it's more restrictive, and there's actually a different level of repression and punishment when it comes to abortion. So you yourself have been affected by that personally. Maybe you can tell us a bit more in detail how that was for you when you were actually charged and convicted, because you helped someone to fulfill their fundamental right. But also, if you, I mean, you already said that you were skeptical about the new government in Poland and the possibilities to liberalize abortion. But still, how did your activism and you putting yourself, exposing yourself in this way, did this contribute in any way to a different debate in Poland? Can you maybe put us in that picture a bit more?
Yes, so I will start with this story about getting charges and then being convicted. It started in 2020. It was beginning of the pandemic, end of February. I received a call from our colleagues from Abortion Without Borders network that there is a person who wants to travel to German clinic, but she's blackmailed by her partner and she's close to 12 weeks. And that if she travels to clinic with at that moment, a 3-year-old child, he would report to the police about the parent kidnapping because she's crossing the border without his knowledge, and so with the kid. And for me, a person who was in a violent relationship, also this kind of things, when you hear that the person is controlled, her phone is controlled, her mailbox, he reads all the messages. It was like a keywords that I knew that she's going through some tough situation. So like having combination of the COVID being very close, the border closing, she's close to 12 weeks, and the violent relationship, I decided to break the law actually and share my own abortion pills with her. And we got caught because this man, this husband, called for the police because he somehow get the knowledge that she's waiting for pills. And when she took the pills from the post, he invited police to their home, and the police took the pills. So this is why the story has been like started. And in 2021, police came to my house. They searched my house looking for more than one package of pills, but I have also another one for my own use. And then the story speed up a little because in the same year, in December, it was November, I received charges, and then in April, the first hearing started, been in a court. The sentence was that I received 8 months controlled social service. I have to work 30 hours each month. We appeal, so I don't do this social service yet. The judge who was judging in this case, she was nominated politically by the previous Ministry of Justice, who was also the prosecutor general in Poland. And the case from the very beginning was very political. The national television informed on their web pages that one of the abortion dream team activists, Justyna W., received charges because of helping in abortion somebody. So we knew that having the judge who was nominated politically and very anti-abortion government was the fight which will not be, there will be not justice in this. And the prosecutor played with marked cards, and yes, it was very tough. I had 7 hearings because witnesses didn't show up in the courtroom, and after like year, we got when this person and this man appear in the court, we have this knowledge why it happened that they didn't appear for a year in the court. We received lots of tough stories from this person, but still the judge didn't took under consideration the situation she was. The judge didn't took that actually abortion never happened. She miscarried because of the whole situation she'd been through. She was also, as a woman, dragged to the police station as a criminalist, not a person who was a victim of violence in the house. So police didn't recognize this also. So it was like many, my case was kind of appeal what is happening with women in Poland, how they are treated in general, how they are not listened by the state, by the government, and how they treat us as a thing, not a person. But my activism, it's not only one thing which I think changed the narrative in Poland, because in last years, our government made a lot of mistakes by letting changing the jurisdiction system, by changing many things in politics, with the law, the mess how they did with the law, but also with this Constitutional Tribunal decision, which actually banned the right to stop the pregnancies because of fetal malformation, which caused 7 deaths of women because of doctors were so afraid to do legal abortions. So how did those changes by the government, they affected the situation, the private situation of people. And you know, society, like we were so frustrated on the situation which has happened with the abortion law, which was restricted, but still at that time was even more restricted, and we couldn't rely on doctors. We couldn't be sure that going to a hospital is a safe place for us, and we have to travel abroad to save our lives. Luckily, at the time, Abortion Without Borders, the network, which we started in 2019, could help those people who couldn't get abortions in hospitals, and we could help not only logistically but also financially those who needed abortions, because of many reasons, also because of the fetal malformation, to travel to Netherlands mostly. So those all situation really happened. It's right now the polls in Poland shows that percent of society really wants legalization of abortion, but this is the society, and different thing is the politics, who really don't listen to their voters, who don't listen to what is happening in the country, how people think about this, and they think that they have a right to decide by their own conscience, not about what the voters think. And this is very tough right now, to convince them that this is not about their thinking, this is not about their opinion. They really have to look on the polls, how their voters want them to vote, and do what actually the society needs. So because of this, I really don't believe in legalization.
I mean, you don't believe that legalization is possible under these political circumstances that Poland
No,
is.
because I see what is happening in the parliament. We meet with those politicians. We have the meetings in Ministry of Health. We see how the doctors behave, how they really don't want us to be this who are pushing the changing of the law. They are like, they want to sit in their positions and don't change anything, because then they will have to admit that actually they are against legalization of abortion.
Yeah, I hope that we can come back to that point also, maybe comparing this later, Katrin, with the German realities, or also maybe there will be questions about that in the chat, because it's maybe a similar, or maybe there is an analogy between polls that actually show the support for decriminalization or legalization of abortion, but the political will doesn't reflect that enough. But first, let us move now a bit further across the Atlantic to Colombia, where there was a big success of the Causa Justa campaign in coming, or at least this is how I view it. Please, Laura, tell us, from a very restrictive law to a legalization of abortions up to the 24th week. So that's a very big transformation. And maybe you can share with us what are the elements of that campaign that you were involved in that made it so successful?
Sure. First, I just want to give you a little bit of background of what happened in my country. When I went to medical school, into my residency, my specialty studies, abortion was completely banned. No matter, there were no exceptions, no rape exception, no malformation, no life exception. So I grew up and I was trained as a doctor with the idea that that was not going to change. A little bit like the way Justina feels now. I thought this was something that was so hard to change, and it was so complicated because there had been a lot of law projects before since the 70s trying to change this reality for Colombia, and they never turned that successful. So in 2006, when I had just graduated as a gynecologist and was already practicing, the law changed. And it was not really the law, it was the Constitutional Court who received the claim of unconstitutionality of the current law that we had at that moment with the total ban, and asking for partial depenalization under exceptions. So from 2006, we had that first successful ruling in which we could we were entitled to have abortions because of risk to life and health, because of non-viable malformation, and because of rape. So 15 years went by, and when I was just a gynecologist working at a hospital, at the beginning, I thought, well, this is the solution. We already have the right to an abortion. But then I soon realized that the system was not ready. Just the way Justina sees her legislators in Colombia, that's the way the whole society was working in Colombia. They wouldn't understand what the law was about. It was still a crime because it was still in the penal code as a crime. So on one side, it was a right, and then on the other side, it was a crime. And it was in our heads as doctors to decide when it was a crime and when it was a right. So it was very confusing. It was very easy to end up limited to the opinion of a person, not the reality, or whether there was a real risk to life or to health or whatever had happened. But it was just about the opinion of someone that could be ideology. Its ideology could be opposed to abortion because of religion or because of morals or because of just social stigma. So during all that 15-year period, I worked, and we actually funded the Medical Doctors for Choice in Colombia, and La Mesa por la Vida y la Salud de las Mujeres, which is an organization that has been working for the decriminalization of abortion since the 70s, and many other organizations worked towards implementing the law in a broad fashion. That is, that every woman would have the right to an abortion, because every unwanted pregnancy and forced motherhood would endanger their health, their mental and social health. But 15 years had happened, and all we could see was a little bit of implementation, a little bit of normalization, but a lot of barriers and a lot of difficulties and a lot of inequity, because women that had money and had information and would live in the capital could go to a clinic and have a legal, safe abortion. But most of the people in my country could not, because in their little town, in their cities that were very conservative, they would not interpret the law in the right way. So we realized that criminalization was at the base of all of those barriers and all of those problems to access abortion, because of the stigma, because of the chilling effect that it has on doctors and on the health system as a whole, because you could not decide if it was legal or not, if you were committing a felony or not. And women were still seen as criminals because they wanted an abortion. So that's where Causa Justa movement started in 2018. That was almost 14 years after the new ruling that we had. And this broad movement's success, I think, has three main elements that made it successful. First of all was the way that the movement was built. It was a very broad movement that brought together a lot of organizations, women's organizations mainly, but many other types of organizations that were working towards human rights. And maybe even academic organizations, like, as for example, well, the Doctors for Choice Colombia, we really work towards women's rights, but also other organizations like the National Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology was invited to make part of this movement. And also very different objective movements, not just movements that had to do with abortion. and also from different parts of the city, not the main cities, which were the more visible organizations. We have a very strong regional representation in our movement. And so the way that we formed the movement was very inclusive and with a lot of diversity. Second, we had a clear objective. This was not just a law project. This was not about changing the law. This was about eliminating the crime of abortion, making abortion not a crime in the penal code, but a health service, an essential health service, and to be treated as such with regulations and policies that had to do with health, not with taking to jail people that were just trying to protect their health. So this was not just about the change in the law, but also we had a clear objective of changing the way that the conversation was being held in public. Explaining to the whole country, that meant the media, the politicians, the opinion leaders, in social media, the community in general, why it was important that abortion was not seen as a crime, why it was important that it was decriminalized, not just depenalized. We were not just asking permission to have an abortion, we were demanding our right to have an essential health service. So the third point this point leads me straight into the third point, and it was all the educational work that we did, and that was the base of the movement. First of all, was building a lot of arguments based on science, on evidence, on studies. We had a criminalization study. We had a measurement of the positive impact of safe abortion in our society. We had a whole book of arguments, and our summary of that whole book is 99 arguments explaining why abortion should not be a crime. So we made, based on those arguments, we made a whole national conversation. We made our way to the media, like, for example, starting with a manifestation in the streets. We had a lot of parades and artistic manifestations that would bring the attention of the media, and that would put our topic in the front pages of the newspapers and the news at night in the TV, talking about the topic of abortion. And we managed to keep the topic of abortion as a main topic for months and months. And this translated in a change of the way that people thought about abortion, because we measured it. We had a national survey at the beginning, and then one at the middle and one at the end, showing how people changed the way of saying abortion from an opinion of something that was maybe wrong to something that should not be a crime and should be on top of the women to decide. So I think those were the three elements, and I'm happy to talk about the arguments later, but I think this is what made a difference here in Colombia.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I took so many notes on like buzzwords that you mentioned, and we will definitely get back to that. But I think it is very clear that that you also had a very straightforward goal, and a very broad alliance, which also included maybe groups that usually wouldn't work together. And I think this is something that I always observed as being very special, because then, of course, you get stronger and more broad. And you already said that you would also like to share maybe some of the narratives that you use, the arguments. And I also look into the Q&A, and I want to start including also the questions from the audience, because there's already some questions coming in. Please, dear audience, put all the questions in the chat. I will try to integrate them as we go. And speaking of narratives, there is a question about that already it was mentioned that there's a lot of frustration about the lack of improvement, and the person asked, is there also anger? And is there space for negative emotions such as anger and rage in these movements, and what role can these emotions play? And if you think that it is rather harming the cause, or it can be transformative to be angry and to also include that in the narrative of the movements. I would firstly give this question maybe to you, Justina, because you already talked about your own story, but also about different kinds of activism. What do you think about anger as an emotion within the narratives that you use?
I think this is in context of Polish situation. I think this is the only one thing which politicians will listen, because when you speak nice, then like I see that they look like they are listening to you, but they don't do anything. But when you start to be angry and you go on the streets and you react with passion, with anger, with frustration, then they start to feel fear. And they take you as maybe not a partner to discussion, because of course this is not happening, but they start to think what kind of causes it may happen, or it may like what could happen if they decide in such way. So I think anger is necessary. Of course, we have to decide who will be showing this anger, because not everybody have to be angry in the same time. But I think this is the point we in Poland which we got, that especially when people are dying, that there is nothing more than anger. Nothing. We don't have to lose anything in such situation that show that stop. This is enough.
Thank you. So I understand that in certain cases it can be quite transformative and powerful to use anger in the narratives and in the campaigns. Do you agree, Katrin and Laura? Maybe Katrin first.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it's working, but it's not so my field of expertise. I'm sorry, I'm not so quite into the movement. So I would like to give the question or the answer to Laura. Thank you.
Laura, how did anger play a role in your campaign at Causa Justa?
I would like to talk for myself, and I think all of us, but it's my opinion, all of us that are activists have a little bit of anger that drives us, because we've seen injustice. Because, for example, me as a doctor, I've seen a lot of injustice in disease and death and suffering because of unsafe abortion. And because I don't want to see abortion as a favor that someone is doing for me, but as my right and as a way of serving in a way of taking care of my health. So I think we are all moved by anger, but we need to know how to manage anger and how to decide when and how to use it. So yes, I agree that anger is a great element in the streets manifestations, even though I think our movement was characterized because of its sovereignty and its, I would like to use the word elegance, because we were very aware of how anger can take the focus to another place where we don't want it to be. So we need to use that anger, and we've certainly used it because we were disruptive. I mean, we were not asking for 12 weeks or for, I don't know, health exception, or we were not asking for a favor. We were asking for our rights. And this has to be based on the anger of those rights being denied for years and centuries, even though the law would protect them already. So one of the things that I want to bring here is, yes, we all had anger, but we all turned all of that energy of anger into arguments, into a lot of serious conversations with people that mattered, because we need to choose our audiences. We were not trying to change the minds of people that were never going to change their minds, as well as we are not going to change their mind because we are convinced of our own dignity and rights. So we carefully chose our audiences, and we carefully chose our spaces. It's very common and very popular when the topic of abortion becomes popular to bring together antis and pros and have debates like if you could share ideas with extremist people. So we kept away from all of those models of journalism in which they just want to see confrontation and fighting and maybe offensive words. And we knew that that was not going to help. The message we needed to get out there and out to the justices in the constitutional court and out to the congressmen that could maybe at some point play an important role was not fighting over ideas, because as Justina said, this is not about opinions, this is about facts. So we were very serious and very rigorous, talking about facts, science, studies, numbers, international human rights arguments, but not just opinions or feelings. And I think we need to find a balance, because anti-rights have been successful by moving emotions, and that's moving anger, that's moving pity, that's moving sadness among people that want to be against abortion, or that think that being against abortion is a way of being a nice person. So we need to find the right balance, not to be just too objective as to seem cold and just data-based, but also to reach emotions of people, talking about real women, talking about the consequences of abortion, and talking about how this is unfair and how angry that makes us, but how serious we are in terms of the discussion of abortion. And we're just not here to scream about the terrible things that we've seen, but also to give them elements to think and to realize how important it was to eliminate the crime of abortion.
Yes, so I understand, like it is very important to choose the audiences and then decide if what's the best strategy to go for. And maybe sometimes that is anger, or also in a more creative way. I mean, you said you also had a lot of events or performances that sparked kind of attention, but then also with other audiences in other moments, to be actually doing educational work and putting the right arguments to the forefront. You also mentioned something earlier. Now I will put in one of my questions because it just aroused, and then I will get back to the audience. I hope you're okay with that. Earlier, you already made this distinction between decriminalization, or like regulation of abortion, versus legalization. And you chose as a movement to completely just go for legalization, not to get into like the nitty-gritty of how we can regulate maybe a bit better or something, but just to legalize it. Now in Germany, I know that this is also a question that we have activists have been asking themselves, and we have also been working on that a bit. What makes more sense? And Katrin, if I can give this question to you, from everything that you have analyzed, also in terms of different country contexts in Europe, maybe you can give us firstly, what is the difference between these two narratives of regulation of abortion or legalization, and is there anything that points towards which one would be more effective, or which factors lead to deciding for one or the other?
Okay, ich muss mal kurz den Kanal wechseln, weil
excuse me, I just had to swap the channels. I didn't prepare to say this in English. Basically, what we can say is legalization is a primary step. We are coming from a situation where the right to abortion didn't exist. And now, since the 1970s, at least in Europe, there were movements to liberalize this. And legalization is an initial step to create a legal framework, and that's very important. in how far this is sketched out. And that also leads to the caring questions and the health insurance aspects, all of that, which is a consequence from abortions as a normal health service. And it's important to understand this. And for me, that is the starting point, but it's not enough. And then you get to a situation that you have a political framework, and that has an effect on we live as society, what our opinions are, how we understand ourselves, and it has an effect on how far we as individuals can claim our rights, exercise our rights. And that is a mutual dependency here, which we have to understand. And in this sense, it is important to push this as far as possible. And it's interesting to see that nowadays we are in a situation where we have a very broad context legally. I have mentioned the recommendations of the WHO, which is more than progressive. If you really did all that, then you have the right of abortion implemented. And it's interesting to see how that came about and why it is so progressive. But so it's very good that you have this, and that in turn, the international context is given with the recommendations and the human rights. And this is actually together with the concept of reproductive justice, which is the basis, or this should be taken as basis to implement the right to abortion.
Thank you. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, actually, it does make sense, or from everything that we know, to push to demand a transformation in the law that is as far as possible, and not start already with a compromise. And in the case of Colombia, this was going for full legalization. I think it makes sense to discuss like what is more effective, to see also what are the words that we're using, also differentiating between legalization and regulation, because that again entails a lot of details that we have to consider. I want to now get back to the chat. There's already a lot of questions. I'm so happy. Thank you, audience, for being so. Oh, Laura, you want to answer to that? Go for it.
Yeah, I would like to make a clarification in recording terms, and also bring up a story about the Causa Justa movement. So, decriminalization is to completely erase abortion from the penal code. So it's not a crime anymore. So the only countries that have a total decriminalization are Canada, the state of New York in the United States, and the state of Victoria in Australia. The rest of the world have depenalization. So this is a crime which in some situations it's not penalized or it's legal, which means you can ask for an abortion under your own request up to certain gestational age, up to 12, up to 20, up to 24, or you can ask for an abortion if you are into an exception. Those are partial depenalizations or partial legalizations. So when the Causa movement started, most of the law projects were focused on including abortion under request up to certain gestational age. And as I always say, women's rights were taken as a political token, because the liberal ones would want 18 weeks, and then the conservative ones want 6 weeks. And then they would negotiate and bargain as if it were a merchandise. And then they would get together at 12 or 14 or 16 maybe. And then they would just rule that abortion was legal up to X week, as if we were a coin of negotiation. And that was one of the main points of our arguments. Why gestational age limits? Do we, at any point of pregnancy, is our value the same as a fetus? Is it because they can move, or because they have organ systems formed, or because they can breathe outside the womb when they are not still outside the womb? Or what is the criteria there? So this is why one of the main characteristics of our movement is that we were asking for decriminalization, taking out the crime of abortion of the penal code, and then regulate it as a health service, as any other health service. But we did not win. I mean, we were successful because we moved from a restrictive law to a very liberal law, but we did not win our demand. And we are still pursuing that objective, because what we won was to legalize abortion up to 24 weeks by demand. And then we still have abortion on exceptions with no gestational age limit until the end of pregnancy, that is from 25 weeks until the end, because of the exceptions. So in theory, we still have the crime of abortion. That is, women that are over 24 weeks and outside the exceptions, which for me medically does not exist, because all women have risk to their health if they are forced to continue a pregnancy. But it is still there in the penal code. So I just want to make something very clear in this, that having abortion up to X weeks, it's not decriminalization. It's partial depenalization, and it means that at some point abortion is not right for a woman because of any reason, which is usually a political negotiation, not a clinical or a public health argument or a human rights argument.
Thank you so much for this clarification. I think, Justina, you want to
Yes,
get right.
I want to add to we did the same. We distinguish decriminalization because we don't want anyone to go to jail because of helping in abortion, doing the abortions, like none, from the legalization. But the politicians really, they think that this is the same. If we have decriminalization, it means that there is a kind of, I don't know, El Dorado of abortion. We can do everything with this. No, this is completely different thing. Legalization is about rules, where you can do, how you can do, and we don't need it because WHO says no regulations are needed. But of course, some circumstances they are needed because there are some vulnerable people, like and this kind of things. But the completely different thing is the criminalization. And I think it's very important, especially in the context of Europe, because we have so many activists in all over Europe, all over the world, who are helping in abortion for different countries where abortion is there is no access to abortion, or there are so many restrictions about this, who help this. And if there will be any country who will have the appetite to chase those activists, even if their abortion is legal on the ground, they can do it. And it could happen also with me. If I travel to Germany and I will share my own abortion pills with other person, I would also could be put in jail or have the court case because of this. So this is not only about specific country, this is about the whole world. We really should do decriminalization as a rule.
I think, thank you also for that addition. And I think also in the light of, I mean, I mentioned it in the introduction very briefly, but in the light of a growing anti-rights movement and anti-democratic movement in the whole world. But if we look at Europe, we saw it in the European elections that we have to fear that actually the far right and the anti-democratic powers will gain even more power. Everything that can that can decriminalize abortion now will help us also in times that are even darker than the ones that we are in now. And maybe this brings me back to a question that I wanted to ask you, Katrin, talking about anti-abortion and anti-gender movements being on the rise everywhere and in Europe. What would you say, how do they affect the struggles for decriminalization? in Germany and Europe. How does it relate to a political climate in Germany, and what have you learned in your observations so far?
Thank you. Yeah, that gives me the opportunity to give an insight into our second publication of the observatory. So we're dealing with the movements opposing the right to abortion. These movements are very interconnected. So we are talking about a well-funded, well-organized transnational network across regional national borders that exert targeted political and social influence. So, and that is what makes them so dangerous. So it's not just for people seeking an abortion and as well as people offering abortion, but basically for all people who want to decide self-determined and who want to live in an open and democratic society. So it's at stake. And about who we are talking. So it's a Catholic Church at the forefront, but it's also ultra-conservative and Christian fundamentalist organization based in USA and Russia, and some of which have also independent organizations or offices in Europe, Brussels especially. And we are talking also about Christian right-wing conservative or right-wing extremist parties in Europe, such as Law and Justice in Poland, but also Fidesz in Hungary, Fratelli Italia in Italy, Rassemblement National in France, and of course, Alternative für Deutschland in Germany. So to understand the aim of the movement is really important because, of course, they first want to ban abortions, including cases of pregnancy resulting from sexualized violence. They want harsh sanctions for all involved. And that is how they understood human life is God-given. Humans are not supposed to intervene. They also use the term unborn life or unborn child instead of embryo or fetus. And they see that abortion is just is a sin, but also a murder, and that is why they call for this complete abortion ban. But second, there's more aim behind this right to abortion or banning the right to abortion. The opponents wants to restore what they call natural order, so in form of a binary gender order of women and men, in form of a also in form of a heterosexual married nuclear family. And this means conversely that they reject all other genders, they reject all other family forms beyond that and all other lifestyles that do not conform to this idea of order they want to establish. And it means that they want to abolish feminist achievements for women, but also for other vulnerable groups. And that is why we say, we were talking in the beginning about the basic principle of gender equality. So they defame this principle as ideology, well known, unfortunately for us, the gender ideology term. And third, and that is what also shows the elections of the European Parliament, but also elections in national states. They want to weaken democracy and the rule of law, like what's happening in Hungary since years and what also happened in Poland. And that is why it makes it so difficult to go back to the status quo, or to go back to where we already started when our right of abortion or the right to gender equalities were diminished. And they're aiming for an authoritarian restructuring. So rejecting gender equality and abortion is linked with racist, nationalist, and authoritarian ideas. So they do it by intimidation, harassment, and threatening of pregnant persons on site. But they also spread misinformation online and offline. They do it quite well. But overall, they lobby, campaign, and network intensively on all levels. And as I said before, they have money and allies across borders. But so we do as well.
Exactly, that's why we are here. So definitely we have to also step up our transnational alliance game, because as we heard from you now, the anti-abortion movement and anti-gender movement is very well connected and much better funded than our movements. That is also a problem, I think, that we have to address. But I think you made a very interesting point here, which is that in the end, also talking about narratives and framing, this is a democratic question, no? Like the abortion, the attack on abortion rights is just an entry point for broader restrictions concerning equality and human rights for more than just the people that can get pregnant, and those are already half of the population. So I think this is something also that we maybe can discuss also later, like what does that mean for a framing, if that we're actually not talking about not even just health issues or women issues, but these are democratic rights that are in danger here. But I would like to now jump again back to the chat. Bear with me. I'm trying to combine my questions and also the questions from the audience. And there were a couple of questions directed to you, Laura, which I will try to sum up, and maybe then you can answer them together. So you had mentioned that there was actually a process or like a poll that you did about public opinion in the beginning of the campaign and then towards the end. So maybe there was a question like, how many years are we talking, like, and how many years does it actually take to change that public opinion? Are we talking months or years? And then there was a question also coming from maybe your partner organization, Doctors for Choice Germany, from Alicia Bayer, who asks, because you mentioned that the Gynecological Association or Obstetric Association was also part of Causa Justa, or that you invited them, because in Germany it is quite a conservative association. It's very difficult to get them on board. So maybe you can share some insights how you managed that, because in the end, the doctors are the ones that are doing the abortions, and that also can influence a lot public opinion because they have a certain authority.
All right. So first, I want to share about the survey. We are talking about short-term movements on public opinion, and this was a matter of a few years, 1 to 2 years, in which we did the surveys. And at first, usually when you ask, do you agree with abortion? Most people are going to say no. But what we found out is that if we wanted to really know how people felt about decriminalization, not what they felt about abortion, the right question was to ask, do you want abortion to be criminalized, and do you want women to have to choose abortion to go to jail? Most people would say no. And when you ask them who should make the decision of whether continuing a pregnancy or not, the woman, her husband, her doctors, the law, the state, then most people would answer the woman. This should be on the woman. So we saw a slight movement of opinion from 40% of people saying, yes, I agree with abortion, to 60% of people saying, no, I don't think abortion should be a crime. And I don't think women should be punished with jail when they decide to have an abortion. And we also saw a movement in the raw question of, do you agree with abortion, or do you agree that women should be entitled to make the decision of having an abortion or not? We saw a movement, but we also saw a greater movement on how people understood the topic of abortion away from their opinion and away from their ideas, but more into a social and public health matter. Also, regarding the National Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology, I know there are very conservative organizations, societies in our countries, in many countries, but I think the society here in Colombia is one of the most involved in the right to abortion, not because they are pro-choice, because I've actually made a survey among associates, and a little bit resembles what we find in the country. That is like maybe 60% of OBGYNs think that abortion should not be a crime and should be a right, but still 40%, if even maybe more, think that it should be just an exception, or up to certain gestational age, or maybe banned completely. And those are the ones that identify themselves as conscientious objectors, supposedly. So I'm going to go to there because someone asked in the chat that if we had enough doctors. So I'm going to link the two questions together. So one of the things that really moved the national society into the movement, or at least to be not to be against, was politics. I think once we've had past presidents that have been pro-choice, and that is the truth. Sometimes it depends on who is on the power position, and this is the truth. Some people, we had a row of pro-choice presidents that supported the movement. And actually, when we were working on the arguments, the president was a woman, and she supported the argument that we built regarding the positive impact on public health that safe abortion had, regarding new unwanted pregnancies, regarding avoiding new abortions, regarding avoiding maternal and neonatal death, and how we could make it better for our country if we had a safe, legal, and free abortion. I don't want you to believe that it's always been easy, because there's been administrations that are not too close to the movement or to the pro-choice ideas. But I think that one thing has been constant, and is that we acknowledge that there are opinions and that some of the doctors completely oppose abortion. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine because it's their conscience, and we are respectful of conscience. That's exactly why we are activists, because we don't want anybody's conscience to be imposed to other people. So we respect those who have distinct opinions, but we truly believe that as a federation and as a national society, we should be on the side of defending women's health. And if we have enough arguments demonstrating that criminalization acts against women's health and causes maternal death, maternal complications, and the violation of freedom of conscience, and the violation of privacy, and a lot of other rights, then as a society and as an authority, and as academic authority, we cannot be on the place to oppose the well-being of women in our country. So we acknowledge that there's people that oppose abortion. We really respect conscientious objection. We do not respect denying, unjustified denying of services, which is what many doctors do. If you are a conscientious objector, we know that we have to refer patients. It's not about opposing abortion, it's about not performing abortions. That's it. But I think we've managed to stay as a neutral society that knows that has to comply with the law, and knows that has a responsibility, and it's engaged with taking care of women's health. And there I want to bring another element, and it's how FIGO, the International Federation of Gynecology of Obstetrics, which with I work, and I am the chair of the Safe Abortion Committee, has clear concepts and clear statements about how abortion should not be a crime, about how FIGO supports decriminalization of abortion. And we have several materials and statements on our webpage that can be useful to engage the national societies, because there is an official position for the International Federation that, of course, no society is obligated to adhere to. But of course, we are based on very scientific and ethical arguments that should be listened to. And that takes me to the other question, and is if we have enough doctors. No, we do not have enough doctors. We will have enough doctors when all doctors take care of their patients in all situations. That is, if my patient needs contraception, then I give her contraception. If she needs preconceptional care, then I give her that. If she needs an abortion, I perform the abortion. And if she needs to have a baby, then I deliver the baby, and I do the prenatal care, which is a continuous. So that is the scenario in which we will have enough doctors. Right now, we have good access in the cities, but we are observing a bad phenomenon, and it's the segregation of services. We have abortion clinics that are accounting for 90% of the abortions. The public health system maybe is accounting for 10% of the abortions, even though those abortion clinics are financed by the public health system. Most women do not have to pay for their abortions, but they are not being taken care in their own primary care service. So that's what we are working towards, and it's for women to be able to access abortion in the same way they access contraception or any other health service in their primary care service or in their hometown and in their city.
I think you actually mentioned, I mean, without saying this, but a point of a framing that also we as Heinrich-Böll Foundation have been trying to promote more, which is reproductive justice, which is about all stages of reproductive life that require access to healthcare and rights, and that we can view abortion as being one element out of many in the life of a person that is able to be pregnant. Also in terms of framing, I think this is a very effective tool. And as you said, maybe one key to kind of, appealing also or demanding towards doctors' associations is that it is not just about abortion, it's about all stages of a reproductive life. And this is a service that they have to deliver. But I think, in Germany, we're still quite far away from that, but I hope your insights might be helpful for some of our listeners. I would like to, since we're approaching the end, but I still have two topics that I really want to tackle. So I ask you maybe to, if you answer, to be a bit concise, but I would really like to know, Justina, talking about alliances, I mean, we heard now from Laura how broad the alliance was for Causa Justa. This happened in one country, but a country that had a very restrictive law. Now in Europe, recently there was this European Citizens Initiative, My Voice, My Choice, that has gained over 500,000 signatures, with the objective to appeal to the European Commission for a right to abortion on European level, on the EU level. What kind of potential does such an alliance have? And maybe there are other alliances that you're part of that you deem to be effective to find a European solution for our problems.
Yes, so this is a very good question, because we are stronger than the movement is bigger. I really admire all the activities which causes the discussion around abortion, or causes the activism around this. For me, it was a very good initiative, and we are part of in Poland. We support this initiative because it connects a lot of countries in Europe where abortion is legal, where abortion is accessible, but also the countries where abortion is legal but not accessible. And if we put those signatures into the European Parliament, there we will see how actually Europe is supporting this fundamental rights. But it will be for me, it's a kind of question mark, how those politicians on the Europe level, they behave in this. I really believe that we will have this 1 million signatures. We are very close to this. But I'm coming from the movement, not from the science side, not from the like doctor side. I'm very practical person, And for me, what is most important is that abortion is done right now, and people are needing abortion right now, not in a year. So for me, all the activities which help people now are more important than collecting the signatures. So this is my priority. In 2019, we started an initiative, Abortion Without Borders. This initiative right now counts 9 organizations. There is a one in Germany, it's called Ciocia Basia. The English translation is Aunt Basia. It's a very popular name in Poland, Basia. So we have this, because those organizations are in the Abortion Without Borders. Those there are in Netherlands, in Czech Republic, in Austria, in Poland, but also in Great Britain, and we know each other from years because we were working in all our countries. But we decided that we have to do something more than just work separately, and we started this. And the advantage of this network is that we can pay for somebody abortion. We started the crowdfunding, we collect money in each country, and we receive money from small donations from individual people. So this is how we pay for it. And for me, this is the initiative I'm supporting the most. I'm not only the member of this network, of course, but because for me, the real help is then you help people now. And I'm very proud of this network. We've been through like crises like COVID, when we have to move people from between borders, when the borders were closed, there was no connections. We've been through the crisis of Constitutional Tribunal in Poland, when there was 300 calls per day on our helpline, because we run a helpline, and people, because of my case, I have a possibility to promote this network on the European level. We start to receive calls from the people even from Germany, from France, from Belgium, where people are above the limits, where they don't have insurance, and they cannot get abortion in their country because of many reasons. They I don't know, have to hide this because of the family members. And
Sorry. I have to cut you because since we have to stop on time. But maybe if you could share the link to the Abortion Without Borders, maybe people can read up on it. And I'm very sorry, but I would like to have one last round before we close, and we want to really close on time. And maybe Katrin, there was one more question that I wanted to ask you. So please include a short answer in your last round. In the last round, I just want you to maybe name 1 or 2 things that you would recommend German feminist activists that are now struggling with the fact that our government is not showing any movement towards putting forward a law. What would you, from your perspective, recommend to the German feminist movement for a right to abortion? And Katrin, maybe to you, since you're not an activist, but you're in a different role, what changes if we look at abortion with an intersectional lens? And please be very short, 30 seconds, and then we will close, and this will not be the last conversation.
So for me, I don't want to give advices because I live in a completely different context, but I don't believe politicians. And I prefer organizing ourselves because this is more efficient than waiting for the politicians. So maybe you will take this as an advice from the person who is doing the support for people.
Thank you. That is very clear. Katrin.
Yeah, thank you. I think including the concept of intersectionality is really worth it, because it goes beyond these debates between pro-choice, anti-choice. And in order to fully implement the right to abortion, the aspects for having a child, not having a child, and the right to parent children in safe and healthy environments, which are the 3 principles of the concept, they all must be taken into account. So otherwise there will always be people or groups of people whose human rights are violated and who are socially excluded and whose access to abortion face even higher barriers than we talked about before, and then all the other people who are pregnant. So I think dealing with this concept also in Germany would be very fruitful for the debate. And I wish the German activists really luck and broaden this context of the right to abortion and how I settled it in a kind of gender equality and democracy frame to gain more people who are aware of that their rights contested as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Laura, what is your final recommendation for German feminists for abortion?
So I would say make sure that people that make decisions, not people who don't want to change their mindset, but people who can make decisions in the government, realize that criminalizing abortion is, in effect, it's not efficacious because it does not prevent abortion. It just leaves out of the system people who needs help and not criminalization. It's also unfair because it affects the most vulnerable ones and the ones that we need to protect. It violates the right to health and to life. This is not just about decision-making of women, it's about their lives and how, if this is a democratic society and a society that seeks equality, that such equality will not exist until women are considered complete citizens and not half-class citizens which need guidance to make their decisions over their body.
Yes.
So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your clear words. I think not all of these strategies can always go together, but I think that is the great thing about a bigger movement and an alliance, that we can pick and choose. You know, maybe we will broaden the concept to include reproductive justice. Maybe some people will be involved in the actual immediate help for people who need an abortion, and others can talk to politicians and explain to them why criminalization makes no sense, and educate people on what are the actual effects on our democracy if we limit half of the population of access to their fundamental rights. So I really want to thank you. Of course, we should have more time. There were more questions also in the chat, but I think that this will not be the last conversation we will be having. And I really, really want to thank you all for your time and words, and everyone in the audience for their great questions. And yeah, the struggle continues, and I thank you a lot for being part of it. There is a list of links if you want to continue reading on what we have been talking about. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for
Thank you.
this invitation.
Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you to the panelists. You were amazing.
Thank you.
And the translators.
And the translators, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.